Anybody who's been alive in the past 20 years has probably noticed a few concurrent trends in popular culture, namely that anime has gone fully mainstream, hip-hop is now the largest musical export out of the United States, and politics at the federal level is entertainment and always has been, and real change requires grassroots community organizing, lest we be swept away in an undercurrent of disillusionment when our meaningless but necessary votes once again yield exactly the results we all know they will. Thankfully, I'll only be talking about 2 of those things in this video, but I promise I'll do one on anime soon. The relationship between anime and hip-hop culture, and in turn Asian and Black American culture, is one that's been developing since the 70s, and arguably before, but I haven't done the research to back up that claim, so I'm just going to start by saying that, as I've mentioned in previous videos, Asian media has permeated Black culture since the era of Blaxploitation films that drew heavily on the kung fu movies that had been offloaded into Black theaters around the same time, which then gained popularity because the 2 genres were the rare source of reliably non-white protagonists. And similarly, Black culture has been a fixture in Japan for about as long as America as a whole has had a presence in the East. There's also maybe some conspiracy theories about the race of the first samurai, but I definitely don't have the time or mental energy to get into that. So, there's a lot of coverage on this subject across YouTube and from sources like Vice, Mashable, Pitchfork, and Genius. Shout out to Jacques Morel, who was supposed to do this video with me before our restructuring. But a lot of this discussion takes sort of an ahistorical perspective and just accepts rappers' love of anime as a given with no prior context you can point back to. So, before I really dive in, I want to re-establish that, as most of us know, the most vivid expression of cross-cultural appreciation in hip-hop came from the Wu-Tang Clan, who built their sampling repertoire on a foundation laid primarily by Shaw Brothers Studios, which produced kung fu films like The 36th Chamber of Shaolin and Shaolin and Wu-Tang, from which the group obviously drew its name. But that wasn't the first example of Black musicians taking inspiration from Asian art. Across genres, artists claim Japanese synth-pop group Yellow Magic Orchestra as pivotal figures in modern dance music, with sample credits from Michael Jackson, Quincy Jones, 2 Live Crew, De La Soul, Jennifer Lopez, Mariah Carey, and one of hip-hop's originators, Africa Bambaataa, who once jokingly claimed that the group who he sampled in his tape Death Mix might have invented hip-hop. And we will not talk about Africa Bambaataa beyond that point. Also, I realize I'm bouncing back and forth between Asian countries here, but all this happened in a time period when there wasn't really much distinction made between China and the rest of Asia, at least in casual conversation, so I think it's fair to assume some of that cultural traffic just kind of got blended together. But the less f***ed up point to make here is that while anime is the de facto successor to the era of Chinese kung fu films, there was already a precedent set in hip-hop for the integration of Japanese music. But this still doesn't explain how we got to modern times, where most people wouldn't even bat an eye at an anime reference in music, because if I'm to believe the Hulu series on the Wu-Tang Clan and the way people responded to RZA's bar, "My mind flashed back to an early moon when I was just a sperm cell in a fallopian tube," then I am also to believe that any unusual or left field lyric would have shocked or confused the average hip-hop head back in the day. So how did that change? Well, the answer will probably not surprise you at all. A lot of people cite one of the first open references to anime and hip-hop as Lupe Fiasco's bar, "Guess Who's on Third? Lupe Still Like Lupin the Third," from his feature on Kanye West's Touch the Sky off his late Registration album in 2005. Now, Lupin the Third is a character with many different appearances, including in Hayao Miyazaki's 1979 feature debut, The Castle of Cagliostro. And it would be simple enough to assume that that's where Lupe's reference comes from, but I feel like that's unlikely, given his age. Not that people can't watch old movies, I've seen Cagliostro, but Lupe was born 3 years after the film's release in 1982, so is it more likely that he knows the character from there, or that he knows it from the much more recent release of Lupin the Third Part 2, the series that was acquired by Cartoon Network in 2002 and aired on Adult Swim the next January when Lupe was 19. I'm doing these unnecessary Wikipedia forensics simply to point to the fact that, as you probably predicted, I believe just about every early connection to anime and hip-hop, with a few exceptions, has a direct line back to Cartoon Network. One of those exceptions, of course, is the case of Kanye West himself, who has publicly stated that his favorite anime is Akira, which was dubbed by Streamline Pictures in the US and animated by TMS Entertainment, who were also frequently contracted on Batman the Animated Series, which re-aired on Cartoon Network from 1998 to 2004 and Toonami in 2005, but that's only an indirect connection. So I think it's safe to say most people who came of age in the late 90s and early 2000s either discovered anime or solidified their love of anime on Toonami, where Cartoon Network created a complete ecosystem that hadn't been seen before in the world of anime localization. Now this is kind of just a recap of a video I did in the before times, but For context, Toonami was not the first anime block on TV, but it was the first that effectively demystified the style for American audiences. Before this point, networks and production companies had tried and failed to localize anime, like in the early days when there were translations that effectively erased the Japanese origins of the source material because of, we'll say, post-war tensions. But once we were a little further removed from Pearl Harbor, programming blocks on TV were still marred by an othering view of anime that relegated it to something foreign that needed to be unpacked, not to mention Americans still maintain an attitude toward cartoons that meant all the violence, nudity, and profanity that we're accustomed to now were regularly edited out to sell what was practically porn to children. So Toonami was the first to eschew that mindset and prioritize the integrity of the work, and of course it paid off. It created a three-dimensional media landscape that sold more mature cartoons to its young viewers, and reviewed music and video games, and took on kind of a big brother role to kids like me who locked themselves in their rooms and trusted the word of CGI robots more than our own parents. And that's paid off. For me. Toonami also grew up alongside its fans with frequent updates to its host Tom, whose death was aired as a fun little interactive game that was probably a lot of people's first experience with mortality. It was my first experience with mortality. Eventually, Toonami added its late-night iteration, Midnight Run, where it aired even less edited anime, and most importantly to this particular essay, premiered music from artists like Gorillaz, an anime-inspired virtual band who've collaborated with plenty of rappers, including known anime fan Del the Funky Homo Sapien of Hieroglyphics and Deltron 3030, his group with Dan the Automator, who also produced Gorillaz' self-titled debut album. In Deltron's debut, Del, in character as Deltron Zero, paints a picture of a post-apocalyptic dystopia where he himself is a cybernetic anti-capitalist, and makes at least one reference to anime when he raps, "Del, I'm feeling like a ghost in the shell. I wrote this in jail playing host to a cell." And that bar predates Lupe Fiasco's by about 5 years, but then again, Del, who is a cousin of Ice Cube, is also very deliberately off the beaten path, considering he cut artistic ties with his cousin after getting his help to produce a pretty successful solo debut. But I digress. In 2001, Midnight Run also premiered the first 4 episodes of Daft Punk's Interstellar 5555, an anime film helmed by legendary director Leiji Matsumoto, and a visualization of the group's second studio album, Discovery, inspired by Matsumoto's manga Captain Harlock. These 2 releases helped build Toonami's reputation as tastemakers, but Midnight Run, which started in 2000, was just a precursor to when we really started to see the crossover between anime and black music specifically. In September 2001, actually 2 months before the Midnight Run special where those 2 pieces aired, Cartoon Network launched the anime side of its Adult Swim block with arguably the most memorable anime OP of all time. Cowboy Bebop is one of the most revered anime to ever reach America by a director who's frequently hailed as one of the most forward-thinking in all of anime, Shinichiro Watanabe. Now, I personally think his emphasis on not just diversity for diversity's sake, but on fair and very not racist representation of black people when they were featured on the show, certainly didn't hurt his case with fans who recognized the quality of the show's jazz music, which he wanted to use as a thematic foil against its futuristic background. That music was composed by Yoko Kanno, who formed the band Seatbelt specifically to create the show's soundtrack. And just as an aside, the main character Spike's fighting style is Jeet Kune Do, which any martial arts fan will recognize as the style of Bruce Lee, just to tie that whole martial arts kung fu thread together. That. Bebop would serve as another genesis point that would further establish the precedent that Cartoon Network would deliver on both anime and music. And they continued that trend with Fooly Cooly's soundtrack by The Pillows in 2003, which featured maybe one of the most recognizable anime end themes of the 2000s, but it was another Watanabe project that drew black fans back in for more. With Samurai Champloo, Watanabe wanted to flip the script of Bebop and pair a story from the past with a soundtrack from the future. So naturally, he chose hip-hop to be the driving sound of the show and turned to a team of rappers and producers including Force of Nature, Fat John the Ample Soul Physician, Tsuchiya, and most notably the late Nujabes, who tends to get all the credit for Champloo's music, and frankly, I'm just gonna add to that. Nujabes, along with Jay Dilla, is considered a pioneer in lo-fi hip-hop, which you're probably familiar with if you've ever had to relax and or study and needed beats to go along with that. Both artists are regularly cited by rappers and producers as influences, while Champloo is hailed as a touchstone for just about every black person who claims to be a fan of anime. After Champloo, Adult Swim further synthesized anime and hip-hop by taking a newspaper comic strip and developing it into possibly the most openly anime-inspired American show up until that point. The Boondocks premiered on Adult Swim in November 2005, just under 2 years after Samurai Champloo's release, and it drew on just about everything anime had to offer up until that point, contextualizing it all through a black family living in an oppressively white suburb. Now, if you know the show, you can see its influences pretty clearly. The opening theme is performed by Asheru, and it mirrors the lo-fi vibe of Samurai Champloo's OP pretty closely. But while black anime fans had already had Dragon Ball Z for years, the one-two punch of Champloo and the Boondocks confirmed what a lot of black people had already believed, that we were anime's target audience. And the Boondocks supported that by explicitly appealing to the black community through its music and through critiques of black culture and institutions that are generally best left for intra-communal conversations, i.e. when there are no white folks present. So while you can certainly debate the Boondocks' legitimacy in the anime space, its existence especially confirmed that the anime landscape as it pertained to Americans was being crafted around black viewership. And then, for a full circle moment, in 2007, Afro Samurai premiered on Spike TV, later on Adult Swim, so it still counts, and featured a soundtrack by none other than the originator of rap nerd RZA of the Wu-Tang Clan, the same man who claimed Dragon Ball Z was the story of the black man in America, and who gets so beautifully excited by anything anime or kung fu related.
Look at this. Got him in the heart and the nuts. Oh, he's going for the nuts. He's going for the nuts. No nuts, kid. He moved the nuts.
Afro Samurai really just doubled down on everything the Boondocks had already established, that anime is for black people, and that Samuel L. Jackson has an incomparable voice acting repertoire. Don't f*** with me. I'll fight you. I don't care. Plus, Afro was actually produced by a Japanese company, which gives it a little extra legitimacy in comparison. So there's that. So, through all these years, from Toonami up to Adult Swim, Cartoon Network put in serious work building trust with its black fans, but it also did a lot more direct outreach in terms of music itself. I'm sure if you watch Adult Swim, you're familiar with its signature bumps featuring music that is consistently, surprisingly dope. Well, that's in part because one of Toonami's co-founders, Jason DeMarco, now creative director and SVP at Adult Swim, and who I've written about before, had to get deeply involved with the network's music programming when they realized the music library at Turner didn't exactly yield the most consistent results. And because Turner's MO, even at Toonami's inception, has always been to keep things cheap, the solution to that problem also had to be financially viable. So DeMarco turned to independent record labels for their musical talent, and among a few others, developed a relationship with Brainfeeder Records, a label founded by Flying Lotus in 2008, which hosts artists like Kamasi Washington, Thundercat, and George Clinton of Parliament Funkadelic. So you can think of the label in a couple ways, either as a cheap music option for anime nerds, or as an incubator for Kendrick Lamar collaborators. I don't know. It's up to you. So that's essentially what an entire generation of anime fans are being exposed to from the early 2000s until now. Adult Swim also had a brief stint as a label itself, building off the success of its release of Danger Doom's The Mouse and the Mask, a collaboration between Grey Album producer and frequent Adult Swim associate Danger Mouse and your favorite rapper's favorite rapper, MF Doom, who you might know for his reputation as a male Lauryn Hill. The album, which featured cameos from Adult Swim characters like Master Shake, Brack, and Space Ghost, and laid the foundation for later collabs like Gnarls Barkley, proved incredibly successful and prompted the opening of William Street Records soon after. William Street released albums from artists like Killer Mike, and it's possible that Jason DeMarco actually introduced the ATL rapper to his future Run the Jewels partner, LP. The label eventually bottomed out because it just didn't have the infrastructure to operate in the traditional manner, but it's continued to license new music from independent artists to introduce through the Adult Swim Singles program, which now releases a new track once a week, 52 weeks a year, and has included artists like Zaytoven, Death Grips, and Flying Lotus, who all sit in jarringly different lanes in the hip-hop world. It's also worth noting that Chance the Rapper would later gain a huge following, similarly releasing music for free on SoundCloud and also dropping the occasional Dragon Ball Z reference. So now we live in a landscape where mainstream artists do generally drive the conversation toward their anime fandom, with Kanye remaking Tetsuo's Hospital Escape in the Stronger video, and Frank Ocean using Majin Buu as a thinly veiled but still exceedingly artistic analogy for pussy. But it's the independent or otherwise left field artists who really wear their fandom on their sleeve, with rappers like Open Mike Eagle, Lil Peep, and Denzel Curry referencing Death Note in their work, or Saw Baby releasing his project Squidtastic in 2018, which features the track Anime World, which heavily references Naruto and includes a shout out to Nujabes. And then, of course, there's still people like British rapper Scarlord, who can most effectively be described as the RZA of Tokyo Ghoul, creating an entire artistic persona around the show's main character, Ken Kaneki. Whew. So this has been my attempt at comprehensively explaining the roots of the hip-hop and anime phenomenon, and I still haven't even scratched the surface, considering there's plenty of anime like Masaki Yuasa's Devilman Crybaby that reciprocate the love from the hip-hop community, and considering I've paid embarrassingly little credence to the rise of female rappers in recent years, like Baby Mother, who sports a notable crescent moon tattoo on her forehead, and most significantly, Megan Thee Stallion, who has gone so far as doing an IG Live interview about her love of anime with Crunchyroll's Tim Lu, who to this day I will not forgive for not giving me a heads up. You know what you did, Tim. Megan blew up off the strength of her freestyles on Instagram, but myself and many of her fans also appreciate her open love of anime and her cosplay of characters like Bulma and Todoroki, whose hot cold powers also serve as a perfect representation of both her hot girl fan base and persona and her alter ego Tina Snow. But I don't know, I've been writing for mad long and I think this might merit its own video. So considering I also work for Crunchyroll, maybe I'll see if I can cop my own interview and unpack Megan's love of anime in depth. But in the meantime, I'm Yedoye and this is whatever outro we've mutually agreed upon. I hope that was a good video, I think. Yeah, I appreciate y'all sitting through that. It's a long time to wait for that video and I appreciate you guys' patience. And I appreciate your patience with us as a group as we sort of get things all figured out. I really hope the podcast is holding y'all over for the time being, or has held you over. Now that this is out, things are underway and I appreciate you guys supporting us for so long. Shout out to the patrons, all of y'all. There are so many of you that I can't even physically name all of you, but there are a few shout outs that I specifically want to give. They're all on my phone because my memory's not that good. So I just want to shout out Sugar Joe, Nicole M, Faber, Andrew M, Angel Soto, Critical 225, Astro Lad, sounds like Astro Boy, that's nice, Kyle, Eric Tortora Pato, shout out on the artwork also, you're dope, Nayeli, Zintheros, Bolwick, and Simon Ponce. Y'all are so dope, you don't have to even contribute that much money. There's so many other things you could spend it on, but you spend it on us, and we appreciate that. We appreciate your support, your patience, and I feel like I've made it no secret that I don't like a lot of things, but you know, y'all are kind of a bright spot in my little life. Life is the word I was looking for. Life. I really hope the scroll has sort of stopped by now. I don't know if there's that many of y'all, but this feels like it's gone on for a very long time. So I'm just gonna kind of stop, and if the scroll is still going, just keep it going. Thank you.